All right, we're live. What's going on? So, JJ Plagiarisms has a lot to say about Andor, and first off, it's already kind of spicy.
People, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you.
Okay, first off, what the fuck does Trump have to do with Star Wars? All right, it's just the first question. Like, what the fuck? I don't even see the correlation. I don't even get the humor. What the fuck? It's just so random.
They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us.
Oh, wow.
Let me confess.
Okay. And Cassian is Hispanic. You realize that, right? Is that the joke?
A massive Trump hater. I used to think that he was a racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic.
Okay, you don't gotta think that extreme, because the whole point of stuff like that is designed to anyway, I'm not gonna get into all that. Look, I just want to get into Star Wars. All right, so
bigot who only got elected because his rival was oh so terrible. So it was either terrible celebrity versus terrible wife of this guy.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
What does any of this have to do with Star Wars? Why are you bringing all this stuff into it? What about the war in space? I thought that was what the whole topic was.
Matured, I've learned to dial back the utter hatred of Trump, and now I mostly just see him as a clueless idiot who has no idea how the world works, hence all his bizarre remarks. That's a fairer way of looking at him, I think, if you don't like him. I sort of see why people might support him. He had terrible competition with scandals of their own, and he's instantly iconic. Plus, it's probably the media that makes such a big deal out of what he said, and I definitely haven't seen...
Can we please get to the point? Look, let's get to the main point. Star Wars. What's going on with that?
...be brave enough for politics, as I've hardly discussed politics on my channel. You might be asking right now, what does this have to do with Andor?
That's what I'm saying. What does this have to do with Andor?
A lot. Reading this article, I was just groaning my ass off. Oh great, this show is just gonna be another shallow look at Trump and just be Republicans bad, Democrats good, vote for Joe Biden, you dick off. And that...
So how the fuck would Star Wars be promoting such a political belief system, genius? What the fuck makes you think Star Wars is thinking about, oh well, Republicans, Democrats, and blah, 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 blah. Vote for this, vote for that person, such and such, this, that, and the third. Star Wars isn't thinking about that shit. Star Wars is thinking about the universe, the world, the philosophical concepts, the motifs. The hell are you talking about? That sounds like projection to me. When did Star Wars bring any of that shit up? Give me some examples.
Anyone who votes for Trump is a racist bigot who supports...
Alright, we get the idea, dude, with you and Trump, but what about the actual review? What about the story, man? What about the Star Wars? Why are you even bringing all this into it? What does this have to do with the war in space? Tell me what the hell does Trump, Republicans, and Democrats have to do with the war in space? Please explain this. What in the world, what in the flippity flying fuck does one have to do with the other? Please explain. Elaborate.
What's this and that? It's getting old. I'm fortunate to look past my biases on Trump. Disney should do the same, but of course they haven't. They can't do a balancing act to save their lives. Hence why we've got Star Wars: The Woke Republic.
Actually, High Republic is pretty good. The fact that you called it that, I mean, that's just the cheapest shot ever. I mean, you didn't even describe what was wrong with High Republic. Just, it's the woke Republic. Like, I mean, God, this is just the most cliche shit ever. You know, when you just go there, you're so anti-SJW. Like, oh my God. You know, you just enlightened the hell out of me. Whoa. You know, come on, bro.
I'm probably never going to read the High Republic because it'll just be invalidated in a few years.
No, it's not. It's a part of the canon. It's not going to be invalidated. Just saying, you know.
Star Wars Eclipse comes out. Nobody even reads the novels except for Disney shill Star Wars Explained.
That's bull, because you read the expanded universe, so why is it wrong for someone to read the actual main official canon? They want to read into what's going on in the Star Wars universe. They want to know what's actually canon, what actually happened in Star Wars. You know? You still want to keep up with it. It's called having a passion for what Star Wars is. Now, can we please get to the Andor review?
If I'm going to listen to a story, it'll be something more real, like Star Wars Legends.
I know what you mean. Because Star Wars Legends had a certain way that they constructed their stories, and it was really focused on the continuity and connectivity and how that fit into everything that happened, and it felt so cohesive and so whole. And this is the reason why so many people are so all over the expanded universe. But what they don't realize is when you reset a continuity, there's new atmosphere, there's new tones, there's new techniques, there's new things you can do with it that you never would have been able to do if you kept it that way, because it would have been expanded in terms of all the knowledge it has, but it potentially might need time to flesh itself out with something brand new. And a great chance, one of the greatest opportunities of that is a continuity reset. It can be fresh idea, and there's so much you can do with that. So it's all up to what you decide to do. So if you make quality, people are going to recognize that. People are going to start seeing that. But if you make things that people really don't like, people might start talking about that too, of course. But when you do something that sucks or that's bad, yeah, some constructive feedback could really help a lot with that. But if you do something that's actually really good, and, all the complaints, all the you have to set that aside for a second and actually acknowledge when they do something pretty good. So if you're going to get on something that's actually this good, you better know what you're talking about. Bringing up Trump, like I really care about that. Come on. That's not important. Bringing up politics, like I don't care what your political affiliations are. That's your business. That's all I'm trying to say. That's your business, but what's important is Andor. That's what's important. Because something like this being made in Star Wars is a very important statement from Disney. It's a very important statement from the Star Wars brand. It's a very important statement. It's a very important statement from Star Wars in general, overall. It's one of the most important statements ever made from Star Wars. If you're going to get on something of this level, you better know what you're talking about.
With that being said, let's talk about Andor as a whole. I had super low expectations, but was open to being surprised. The makers of Rogue One were making this. I tolerated Rogue One, but I didn't...
Yeah, okay, there goes something we actually agree on. I was not a fan of Rogue One, but when I saw Andor, I just rewatched it again. It is impeccable storytelling. It is literal art, and it's just fucking so fascinating to see it unravel itself. Once you see it all unravel, it's so fascinating, and brilliant. And seeing things like this are not only rare in the entertainment medium from Hollywood, but it's but in the Star Wars universe, something like that is never been done before. You could say that was revolutionary for the Star Wars universe, yeah. Since it was an evolution of the original trilogy's concepts, philosophical themes, and ideas.
I didn't pin the failure of that movie on the people who made it. It's mostly the Disney executives who ruined it. It seems that Disney overwrites the masterpieces and causes them to flop and greenlights the rubbish.
Alright, come on, let's get to Andor though.
Man, do I just hate The Last Jedi. Cassian Andor is a bare bones character.
I guess, but the show explored his character so well without really having to directly focus on him at all times, because it turned Cassian Andor into a conduit of he's more like a conduit. He's become a conduit to which he can express the story. The story expresses itself through him, but it doesn't always focus directly on him, making him a much more fascinating character because you follow his story in a very different lens.
There's no previous connection. He was a secondary protagonist in a story that wasn't really character driven. Out of all the...
It doesn't matter. What matters, because stories could either be character driven or story driven, as long as it's good, So that doesn't really, so what?
spin-offs they could have made out of Rogue One characters, this was probably the most interesting, but that's not saying much. This show was going to have to make Cassian Andor into a real character from the ground up. Doesn't seem impossible, but since there was no prior investment, Disney were going to have to make us care about this nobody. I had no idea.
Oh, goodness. Again, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but they explored his character in the show. He's a conduit for the story of the show.
Why this story was greenlit. Is Diego Luna just a huge Star Wars nerd or something? What even is the critical response to Star Wars in Mexico?
You should see the critical response to Andor. You should pay close attention to that.
According to Disney Shill Star Wars Explained, this show is apparently going to go on for 3 to 5 seasons with 12 episodes each, which is just insane. The Mandalorian is probably the pioneer of this Disney Plus bullshit, and we're still waiting for season 3. Also, this
You take a long time to get to the point. Hold on a minute. I'm just gonna get straight to Andor. You take quite a while. I just need you to hold on. Let's see.
Captured by the Empire, and Rogue One plays out as it does, and we actually give a damn about Cassian Andor this time, and his death in Rogue One. If you're watching this like a marathon, Cassian, for no reason, taking their sweet time with the story. But the upside is, at least with the first 3 episodes, there's no filler this time. So let's talk about it. So this
Wait a minute. What are you talking about? There is no filler in Andor. Andor has no filler, JJ. So where did you get that from? 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 JJ, there is no, I repeat, no filler inside of Andor. There's no filler in there. Where did you get that from? Now, where did you get that from? Where did you get that from? Every single episode inside of Andor, I want you all to know this, fits into a cohesive whole, into one season. And all these episodes build off of the next, and the next builds off of the last, and each moment builds on to the next until, bam, payoff after all that buildup. Now, the thing about it is, what makes Andor so great is that it never did anything like that. It didn't have any filler in between all that. So that is objectively wrong. This is not the Mandalorian. This is not, and I'm not trying to get on the Mandalorian. No. This is okay. What I mean to say is other shows have actually had filler. Andor is not one of them.
show starts on the world of Morlana 1, which is supposed to be a planet owned by a corporate authority. Cassian walks into town and arrives at a bar. Once there, a working girl asks him what he's here for. Cassian asks for someone that comes from
Wait a second. You actually understand the plot in some way. Because so far, you're actually breaking down what happened in the story. That means that when it came to your sit down with Sheev Palpatine about this, why did you have such a lack of understanding of the show if you've broken down the show itself in some regards? Especially the first scene, which is one of the most important scenes in the show. I fail to see how you could not, how you could analyze but then still not understand the story and plot and not be able to explain it when you're with Sheev. I don't understand. So this is just baffling.
Along the way, two patrons are just being douchebags to Cassian for no reason. Cassian's being
because they're abusing their power from the power infrastructure. They're abusing it. That's why. And Andor's kind of caught right in the middle.
First, boo.
And he was searching for his sister.
You can wait your turn. Well, these two are extremely dickish from the offset, but the thing is...
So you understand their purpose in the story, right? So how could you say that it needs to be like the Joker when you understand the context of what it was supposed to be for Andor? I don't understand that, JJ. Where do you get that from? Why are you thinking about the Joker when you're seeing Andor? Why am I thinking about the Batman when I'm seeing another movie or something? Like, if I'm seeing another movie, I'm not going to think, well, in The Batman movie, they did this and that. So you got... No, I'm just thinking about what it meant for this particular story at this particular moment.
They don't go far enough with it, especially with...
What? They don't go far enough with it? How far do you need it to go? Andor kills them both. Spoilers, people. Andor kills both of those men. How far did you need it to be? How dark does it have to be before you realize, damn, that's pretty heavy shit? What the hell are you talking about? They both die. That means they're dead. They were killed. Death, JJ Plagiarisms, fucking death. They died. How dark do you need it to be? How far do you need it to go?
With what happens later. The working girl informs him about a woman who was from Canary months ago, but cannot provide a name. When asked what his relationship is to the woman he's seeking, Andor says that it's his sister. When I first watched this, I was like, wait, Andor has a sister?
Yes, in the flashback in question, his sister was in the flashback. He's looking for a girl who was on a planet, his home planet, which is different from where he is now, which is Ferrix. His home planet is Canary, and on Canary, he had a sister back when he was on Canary. That's the reason why he's still looking for her. He remembers her.
Well, I suppose this is supposed to be Andor's backstory, so I'm not gonna complain. That would be invalid criticism. After leaving the bar, he is confronted by the two dicks who plan to mug him. Well, unfortunately for them, they chose the wrong person to rob. And one of the rare compliments I'll give this show, Andor does a pretty brutal back headbutt and tackles the second guy, bashing the weapon out of him.
That's
now,
right.
with the upper hand, Cassian points the blaster right at the second guy's head.
Exactly.
The back headbutt was so brutal that it killed the first guy.
The first guy. Exactly. So you understand. Okay, so you understand it. You even meaned it. What the hell? So if you understand the story and you understand what it meant for that scene, why are you sitting there making it like, what was the problem with that scene then? That means it served its purpose. That means you have to admit that it was actually a good scene that served its purpose. Why are you making it like it didn't serve its purpose? Like there was something wrong with it, or there was a problem with it. What problem with the scene? What's the problem with the scene? There was nothing wrong with. So that means that scene served its actual purpose. Those two men go after Andor, right? He's looking for his sister. That's why he's investigating. That's why he's talking to the lady. And not only that, but then on top of that, he's looking for the lady. He's talking to the lady. I apologize. And then after he looks for his sister, the two guys step out. And when they step out, all of a sudden, they start messing with Andor. When he steps out. They try to stop him, ask him how much money he's got, see what they can do and stuff like that. And they're trying to mug him because they are so abusive with their oppressive infrastructure that they're abusing their power. That's just that's how corrupt the Empire is, and that's how far deep the corruption goes. And in self-defense, Andor headbutts one of them to get the blaster out of his hand, so he's not in a situation where he can get shot or robbed, or both. And when he headbutts him, he doesn't realize it, but that dude dies from the impact of his headbutt. That's how powerful it was. And then he fights the other guy. He points the blaster at the guy and realizes, oh shit, he's in a serious situation right now. It's no joke. Because that guy is dead, which means the Empire will be on his ass like you've never seen. So that's when all of a sudden Andor thinks for a moment very carefully about his decision. And then he kills him. And afterwards, when he does this because he realizes there's no other way. He has to kill him. Because once he talks, once he's out there, if he goes in with an Imperial to tell the Empire, oh, whoops, I killed one of your guards? Are you serious? You think the Empire is going to give two shits about the who's, the what's, the where's, the why's? The Empire is already corrupt, so if you kill one of their own, what do you think that means? That's what Andor was realizing.
Headbutt and tackles the second guy, bashing the weapon out of him. Now, with the upper hand, Cassian points the blaster right at the second guy's head. The back headbutt was so brutal.
So you have a fundamental understanding of what the movie is and meant, and yet you... Oh, sorry. So you have a fundamental understanding of what the TV show is and meant, and yet you still have that same criticism of, oh, well, it should have been like the Joker scene. No. The scene literally served its purpose for that exact moment at that time. And you could tell yourself, even when you're breaking down the plot yourself, and yet you still decided to say that. It makes no sense.
That it killed the first guy.
Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
And of course, the pathetic second guy.
See, you literally understand this scene. So you should understand why it should be in there. And that's why every scene does not play out the same way. Everything serves its own purpose.
He begs for his life, and Andor just shoots him without remorse.
Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Of course, Andor quickly flees the scene. So what's wrong with all this? Well, I didn't feel like they didn't go far enough with it. The presentation proves to be the biggest problem in this whole show. That's probably why it's so boring. Now, something I wanted to talk about.
Presentation? Are you serious? And plus, boring is subjective. You should at least bring up an actual criticism with something being wrong with the plot, not necessarily just some subjective opinion.
Is that I don't see boring as an absolute prerequisite for bad every single time.
Okay, so you gotta clarify.
Let me explain. Something can be bad because it's boring.
That's stupid. No. Something can... You can think it's boring, but that doesn't make it bad. That's subjective.
But boring doesn't automatically make...
Plus, you didn't bring up any legitimate criticism about the plot or story. You just said, oh, well, the presentation was boring. That's it? Really? That's your best criticism that you can come up with Andor was, oh, the presentation is boring. Come on. Are you serious right now? Really? Really?
Make something bad. It's the same reason a silent film like Nosferatu isn't bad because it's boring. Nosferatu is boring by modern standards because...
Okay, so then how was that movie, by your standards, not bad, but by the standards, Andor's just bad? That's stupid. Because that's a contradiction and a double standard. Because if Nosferatu is boring, then therefore, by your standard, it should be bad. Just like how Andor is quote-unquote this and that. So that doesn't make any sense, because you're saying that Andor is bad because it's boring. Nosferatu is somehow boring but not bad. That doesn't make any sense. That's a contradiction and a double standard. Come on.
This is a silent film.
And with that being said, truth is Andor is phenomenal. And there's some impeccable storytelling. It's really, really good. And to have something like this in Star Wars, people should be grateful. We did not have to get Andor. We could have got, you know, we didn't have to get Andor. We could have never gotten something like that. That's a gem. Stuff like that only comes once every 20 years. You got to really appreciate that.
Film, and modern audiences won't have a lot of care for it, but that doesn't make the film bad. This is what I mean. The reason why I don't take any of the prequel haters seriously when they say the prequels are boring without explaining why is because they have the attention span of a goldfish. Boring is subjective, and because you find a film boring...
So if you know that boring is subjective, why did you just use that then? Why did you use it? You know that boring is subjective. You know this. But you decided to use it anyway. Why? How are you going to use boredom knowing that it's subjective?
Boring doesn't make it bad automatically. I think it needs to be judged case by case. Talking about Rogue One again, I thought it was boring, but overall, I'd say it's an okay film. Why? Well, that's...
What? No. That doesn't make any sense. Now you're contradicting it again. You're saying Rogue One was Well, here's the thing. If you say that something is boring, right? All because of the fact that, oh, well, it doesn't match the standards of what you want to see in Star Wars and stuff like that, then you got to stick to it. You can't contradict it and be like, oh, well, if something's boring, it's bad. You know, I know that something being boring is subjective and it doesn't mean that it's bad, but I'll still say that about this in particular, which is a double standard and a contradiction.
That's a difficult question to answer. Boring is always associated with bad. My theory is that the bad kind of boring is something that leaves you empty. Like, as a blatant example, watching paint dry. What do you get?
Okay, that is fucking stupid. That is one of the dumbest examples you could have used. Because this is a TV show where you're watching people do things and move around. Watching paint dry is literally just watching paint dry. So even that comparison is so fucking stupid. And when people use this comparison, it's really ignorant. Especially with a TV show like Andor. Are you serious? You can't pay attention to subtlety? You can't pay attention to subtle buildup and storytelling? You're not patient enough to let the story take its course and pay full attention instead of being on your phone playing Tetris as you claimed yourself like at one point you did?
Get out of that?
Absolutely nothing.
But something that's boring simply because it made you drowsy and not because it was empty. That's what I'd classify Rogue One as, because of the idea behind it. It intended to be the direct prelude to A New Hope, showing the struggles of the forgotten heroes who were able to make A New Hope happen, but were overshadowed by the heroics of Luke Skywalker and friends. That is the opposite of empty. It's boring, yes, but it's not bad. I hope I've made my point clear enough.
No,
it's difficult to describe. So after killing
all you did was expose the fact that you have a contradiction and a double standard, because you claim that boring can be bad, right? Or boring for this particular instance when it comes down to Andor means bad. But then you want to sit there and turn around and say that, oh, but boring doesn't necessarily mean bad for this, or boring doesn't necessarily mean bad for this other show. It just means that it's boring, you know, and, you know, it's dumb. And you see the bad kind of boring is like watching paint dry. Okay, so you're trying to accuse Andor of being the bad kind of boring. And yet, that's a double standard because you're not saying that towards these other things like Rogue One that you thought was boring, but, oh, it's not necessarily bad. That's stupid. It's not necessarily bad, though. It's not necessarily bad, though. But you just said that this is bad because it's boring. So what the... It's a contradiction. That's what you basically are exposing here.
Trump supporter and fleeing the scene, he doesn't try to hide the bodies for some reason. Pretty interesting start, actually. But after seeing that, the show...
You want him to hide the bodies. How dark do you want this to be? That's what I keep asking you. Plus, he has to get away. He doesn't have time to hide those bodies because he needs to escape before any other Imperials show up. So he doesn't even have time to do that.
Goes downhill
so if you try to use that as a flaw, that's not really fair towards the show.
Incredibly quickly. I also wanted to talk about what Andor just did. I feel like they didn't go far enough with it, as mentioned before. Our introduction to these two guys of them being a dick to Andor.
What are you talking about? What do you mean they didn't go far enough with it? What are you talking about? How did they not go far enough with it? What the... Let me ask you an important question. How in the flippity flying fuck did they not go far enough with it? What are you talking about? How? What do you mean they didn't go far enough with it? What do you mean? It's already really fucking dark. The dude Andor attacks someone and they die. You understand? They die from the impact of his blow. Don't you realize? He's on the ground dead. The other guy panics. He begs for his life. Andor's over here pointing the gun right at him. And he knows that he has to make a choice, a decision. And the first thing that he does is, he makes the ultimate choice. He kills him. That's really fucking dark. Then he gets away, right? And now he's under investigation for killing 2 corporate officers who were really coming after him first. That was really self-defense if you really think about it. But it's morally ambiguous. It's gray. It's not painting it in one area or another. It's up to you to interpret it. What part of that was not far enough? What the hell? How far do you need to be? How mature and dark do you need to be? I mean, what the hell? Why does it have to go super duper far? Like, what the fuck are you even talking about when you say shit like that? What the hell?
And then trying to mug him, and then their plan backfiring. That's it. When Andor shoots the guy out of spite, or not wanting to get caught with murder, or whatever, it doesn't feel earned. An example of this sort of thing done correctly is the movie Joker.
Wait a minute, what do you mean it didn't feel earned? How did it not feel earned? You have to explain that. You said that it didn't feel earned, and then you just used another movie as an example where, oh, this is where it felt earned. Okay, but you didn't explain how it wasn't earned in Andor. So you didn't prove anything.
Context. In that movie, the main character Arthur Fleck is fired from his job after a co-worker lies about him buying a gun, after it slips out of his pocket despite his co-worker being the one who gave him the gun. So Arthur, down on his luck, is taking a subway back to his home. We see a woman and 3 upper-class guys. The 3 guys are harassing her and generally being misogynistic. Arthur, who has a condition that makes him laugh uncontrollably when he's stressed, starts doing it, and the woman takes this as an opportunity to leave and go to another tram. The 3 Wall Street guys surround Arthur, mocking him and asking him what's so funny. Arthur tries telling them about his condition.
It's funny. These guys were humiliating Arthur. This is different. In that situation, those guys just wanted to mug someone because they wanted to, because they had the power to do it. They were taking advantage of their power. These are 2 completely different situations that both serve different purposes. This is to show you just how corrupt and bad society is for Arthur. That scene was to show you how corrupt and bad the Empire is to innocent people. That is the difference.
And they grab him, intending to bring him harm. The things they say, like, "I'll tell you what you have, asshole." And when Arthur tries to resist by kicking, one of them has a smug,
"Here's a newsflash, y'all. Uncle Sam is blessing us with a 5K spending card that is available for everybody."
We got a kicker, huh?
Before telling the other 2 to hold him steady, and punches him hard. In a way you can tell he did not pull that punch. He wanted it to be as painful as possible. The 2 then join in with kicking Arthur while he's down, with no remorse. In fact, they laugh sadistically while they do it. Arthur then turns the tables by shooting.
Like I said before, it's a completely different concept. I just explained, so I'm not going to repeat myself, so I'm going to, but take what I just said with what,
Frustrated. Anyone could come across people like this. So the established start for...
No, you don't always come across a couple of guys who have guns and weapons and badges to manipulate and get people to stop and harass people and put people in dangerous situations. That is not true. So you can't just randomly come across that. So that's not even accurate. What are you talking about? This is a bad situation that happens because you're living in a world where the Empire exists.
For mugging Andor isn't really there. As I said before, they try to mug him, and they're clearly 100% in the wrong, but they...
What are you talking about? Okay, in the scene in the Joker, those people were in the wrong, trying to harass an innocent person. Okay, so in this scene, they're in the wrong. They're trying to harass an innocent person, but they want to mug him.
They aren't as hostile and terrible as the 3 Wall Street guys. And
it doesn't matter. They're still doing something that's very hostile and terrible. That's what matters. They're trying to mug an innocent person, and I don't understand why you're bringing the Joker into this, when in the Joker, again, it had different context, and there, the people there were harassing him for the sake of it. Here, they want his money. They want to take advantage of with their power. It's to show you the corruption of the Empire.
Andor uses self-defense, but I think the reason it wasn't satisfying as in Joker was because you're not really with Andor as he does this. You're not feeling as he's feeling. Andor mostly has been so...
You mean feeling as he's feeling? Okay, listen, JJ, you have to at least give the show a chance at this point and let the show allow the character to breathe so you can feel what he's feeling.
Some random guy with the personality of a rock rather than an identifiable protagonist.
That's not true. It's the fact that the show is a conduit through... You don't get it. The story, the conduit of the entire story is Andor. It's not necessarily always told in his perspective, but even though it's not always told in his perspective, it still takes place. It might be told from different perspectives, but the conduit of the story is Andor. So that's the kind of creative lens that it's taking place. It's not always directly about Andor. It's not always directly towards Andor, but it still gets the story across just fine. So when Andor does show up, his scenes matter and have weight because he shows up at times that are purposeful and meaningful.
Andor doesn't really feel like he wants to kill these guys, or even that he's trying to protect himself from...
Of course not. He doesn't want to kill these guys. Like, he wants to get the hell out of there. That's what a lot of people would want. They wouldn't want to be in a situation like this.
From a mugging. He's had no personality thus.
And I think that's the entire point, because you brought up the Joker, and it's like, this is a pretty serious fucking situation right here. And you brought up the Joker. Wow. Not thinking about, compare this to everything you've ever seen Disney make prior. Think about that. This is one of the darkest situations ever put to the Star Wars universe in years. This is some serious shit. He's being mugged by the Empire on the street, and you know, he fights back in self-defense, hits one of them too hard, they die. He has to kill the other guy, because if he tries to go to the Empire and say, oh well, I shot one of your own, oh, the Empire is already corrupt, so what do you think that means? What do you think that means?
Far. Or in Rogue One. Also, when the first guy dies, the second guy talks like we're supposed to feel sorry for his friend. It's a very weird...
No, you don't get it. He is talking the way that a human being would talk when they're pleading for their life. That's what you fail to understand about the scene.
Feeling. I think for this to work, it should have started with something more easy to get behind. Like, for example, them trying to harass a woman, or...
No, you don't need to switch it to, instead it's a woman, just to get a certain emotional reaction when it was already just fine the way it was and still garnered the right emotional reaction from the very beginning. You don't have to add all these other things in there just to garner that. That doesn't make any sense when it already established and achieved what it was trying to do. It achieved what it did. It was an experiment that worked. It already worked. You don't need to rearrange it in this area, that just for that to work when it was already working just fine. No.
Beating down a homeless person on the street when no one's looking.
So you want it to be more over the top and extreme with how bad they are. Come on, man. Don't you think that it should be more realistic? I think it's more realistic that it's not over the top. They don't just beat up some random guy on the street. Like, no, they tried to mug someone. They thought they can, be a little, that's more realistic. That's more believable. What you're saying is not even as realistic, not even as believable. That means that they did a good job of making you feel like this is real. They thought about believability in Andor. They really thought about that. So, yeah, yeah.
Something like that. I've heard the counter argument that it was a moral grey moment, but I mean, Joker was in the grey too. Arthur was not a good person, but he wasn't bad either. At least not until he goes insane and fully turns into the Joker, and kills people he probably shouldn't have. In fact, Star Wars itself has done this sort of thing well too. In Darth Bane Path of Destruction, the man who becomes Bane, Dessel, who was...
Oh yeah, Dessel lived in the mines and he had issues with his father, and he was the one who if I'm not mistaken, was responsible for the thought bomb. And there was a lot of stuff going on with Dessel, I know. And of course, you've made videos on it. You know, I've seen a lot of these videos. You make great work, but the problem is the fact that you say things that are so inaccurate towards a show, a certain show, that did a certain thing pretty well. Like, this is the first time in Star Wars history in years that we have this level of sophistication, realism, and depth put into the Star Wars universe. That's mind-blowing. Wow. Andor also soars itself above most shows because not only is it great for what it was in the Star Wars universe, but it's just excellent even in comparison to other TV shows. There's other TV shows that Andor, in comparison to Andor is just phenomenal. It rises above so many TV shows. It's one of the best TV shows I have ever seen in my entire life. It was just excellent storytelling, excellent writing. The writing, Tony Gilroy really writes some compelling dialogue and lines, and some of the lines and things that they say in this show is just so excellent and hits the right emotional and depth, and just there's so much. And I just feel like you're reaching hard. And of course, I know you love the EU, but you can't apply that to every situation. Oh, well, that was done in the EU and it was better. Wait, actually, that was in the EU and that was already, like, dude, after a while, you got to see it for what it is by itself, separate from the expanded universe. Because remember, the continuity got reset. So we got to see how good is this by itself on its own. What does this mean on its own? You got to really think about that.
Was also down on his luck. Since he's stuck in indentured servitude with his job as a cortosis miner essentially, he plays a bark with some Republic officers, including an ensign who is smug and pretentious. He plays Dessel in the card game and loses, making him go ballistic and trying to lunge at him. He's a sore loser. He also has a delusional rant at all the locals surrounding him that the Republic protects them and that they're all ungrateful. Pretty much the opposite of sympathetic. This guy is clearly from a wealthy system and was probably spoiled rotten before joining the Republic army. It's also an easy inference to make too. Later, when Dessel is walking back to the barracks, the ensign and two other officers ambush him with the intent to kill him. Through a premonition, Dessel detects a vibroblade being pulled out by the ensign, counters his attack and kills him. The two other officers run away, intending to tell their superiors a falsified version of what happened, causing Dessel to escape off-world with help from a Nemoidian named Groshek. Event leads to another, and eventually he's the Dark Lord of the Sith. I suppose in a lesser...
They were going to tell a falsified version of that's what he was offering Andor. He offered him a falsified version of what actually happened.
Equivalent, Anakin killing the Sand People too after his mother dies by their hands. That was also great because Anakin slaughtered the entire village, not just the men, but the women and the children too. The Sand People are savages and Anakin took it out on them in turn. All three examples I just gave with Joker, Bane and Anakin all work, while Andor doesn't. I think this is important because as the main instigator for the entire story, I think it's essential that Andor gets...
You can't make a broad claim like that when you didn't even explain what about it didn't work. Now, did you explain that? No, you didn't. What about Andor makes it not work? Why don't you break that down? Did you break that down? No. So you can't make a broad claim without breaking down the plot, the elements, the details, and the storytelling, and explain why it didn't work. You have to explain those things, and you didn't. The only thing you explained was a comparison to the Joker movie or Darth Bane from the EU. Are you serious? That's a cheap shot, bringing up the expanded universe when you know the continuity got reset. So you got to really be loyal to what it actually is on its own. And bringing up the Joker when those movies have different situations and totally different contexts. And for the context of Andor, that really worked well for Andor. And that was at the right time and place for where it fit in that story. Because every story is not going to always have a super over-the-top scene where they're beating up on random people just to emphasize that they're bad. Sometimes evil is more subtle than that. And Andor shows that. And it doesn't tell. well, sometimes it tells, but it does show quite a lot, and it shows, and it shows and doesn't tell quite often. So sometimes those things are more subtle, and you can miss it. If you're not paying attention, you could miss it. And you got to pay attention to these things, because you could miss it. Because you're not even, but yeah.
It's the whole thing across effectively, but it doesn't. Also, one last thing. Andor doesn't struggle with any of this. He comes off as indifferent and then annoyed after he turns the tables. Anyways, when Andor retreats,
Are you out of your mind? Do you realize what that one event starts to create for Ferrix? Are you serious? And what happens with Ferrix with the Empire? I thought you said you've watched this show. He did not react like that. You don't understand. A lot of people tried to blame him for that, for what happened. And that affected him greatly. That's why he tried to, just be like, he tried to be on his own thing, and he tried to, it affected him. And it's crazy because, that was like his defense mechanism. He had a defense mechanism for just how much people just kept blaming him and stuff like that. And you could tell in the show that that's what that was, and it was actually really subtle and well written. And I'm talking about specifically the way he reacts. Yeah, like there's times where he'll react greatly to something, but it's not necessarily told to you, it's just shown. And you have to pay attention to the subtle details to really get those scenes, And then there's times where he reacts greatly to where it's like things do get emphasized, and you do hear people kind of raise their voice sometimes and stuff like that, and it gets intense. And there are times like that where that happens, but you have to literally pay attention and catch those things. Because again, these things are not always really told to you. It's very subtle. So you could miss it if you're not paying attention.
Turns to his home on Ferrix. After a boring, drawn-out sequence of a droid...
I don't blame you if you feel like the state don't care about you
here's the thing, JJ.
But they finally stepping it up with something solid. A straight up...
One thing you have to understand is before I even came here to respond to your video, guess what? I started rewatching Andor, Now, I get it, but I just think that it's a good idea to at least know what you're talking about. Make sure you rewatch the show before you start coming on to other shows or other like channels and stuff like that and talking about the show, or before you decide to do a review. That's what I'm basically saying. Because then when people see the review and they've seen the show and you haven't, they're going to be like, well, this is uninformed. He just put a bunch of Trump jokes here or there. And that's like, I thought you were talking about Star Wars. Yeah. And it's going to make you come across as a person who doesn't know what they're talking about when it comes to things like Andor in particular. Like with this show in particular, you just don't know what you're talking about. You just haven't really paid attention to the show. And you're adding all this other stuff here about the Joker. Like it has to be specifically the way the Joker did dark and gritty. Just for it to work, when everything has its own unique form of storytelling. Everything is not going to always be like the Joker. It makes no sense.
In question goes up to Andor sleeping in his home. It's here where we get the first flashback. We see that Cassian was from the planet Canary, which is a retcon because he was originally from Fest. But later in episode 2, they do address the retcon
JJ,
by saying that
when there's something this good, it doesn't even matter. Yes, it's a retcon. The show even acknowledges it just in case people complained about it. My God. I mean, okay, it was a retcon. You're all right. But, oh my God, the show was that good. Like, it doesn't even matter. I'm telling you. And on top of that, yes, it was a retcon, but dude, let's just be real for a minute. They explain it in the show. They literally explain it.
Fest was a falsified documented homeworld, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here, since they actually bothered to explain this for once. There isn't a lot to say with the first episode. It's mostly a drab, boring slice of life story of Andor. The pace.
Oh, really? So why don't you break down that same story and plot and then tell me just how drab it is? Okay, so then why don't you break down this plot, break down the story? What about it was so drabby? What about it didn't work? What about it was wrong on a fundamental level? Why don't you fundamentally break down the plot, details, story, character, and all that right along with it?
In the episodes is terrible. Our pilot to a show is supposed to convince you to watch more of it. All episode 1.
Actually, the first, you know, here's the thing. Pilots are supposed to introduce you into the story, the characters, the world. Better Call Saul did not start off its pilot the way Breaking Bad did, with a boom. It actually started with a small hoorah, a very small little push. It was slow. There was buildup. There was tension. It did not focus on trying to pizzazz you into watching it. It was more focused on building its story and characters and letting its world have a chance to breathe. So if Andor takes that same opportunity and it wants the audience to sit down and give it a chance to breathe, it's great to accommodate that. And for you to accommodate that, you're in for something interesting. You're in for something special.
Does is just be set up for future episodes. Honestly, the first 3 episodes should have been condensed in one. This series could have and probably should have half the.
You can't just start condensing things in the show. If you start condensing things in the show, you're going to lose track of some of the most important details in the entire story. And there's going to be aspects of the story that are missing from the overall, and you're going to have a serious problem on your hands.
The length of the episode at best. This show feels like a waste of time. Rogue One felt at least you got something out of it. So
get the hell out of here. This was an improvement over Rogue One. That's not a waste of freaking time. That's an improvement. They're actually improving on what they're doing. So what are you talking about? How could you say something like that after everything that they achieved for this show? After everything that they achieved for the Star Wars universe with this series, and not just that, but even other things that they made. Disney didn't just make booty. Disney didn't just make stuff that people didn't like. Disney's made some great stuff too. So that's not even true. And if there's good things in the new continuity, then that's good. That's actually a good thing. So what are you talking about?
So I guess Andor counts as the bad kind of boring by my definition so far. If this show was supposed to be about the
yeah, by your contradictory and double standards, because you're saying that this is the bad kind of boring, but then Nosferatu is boring. Oh, but it's not bad. Oh, get the hell out of here. If it's boring, by your definition, that should mean that it's bad. But you're not going to be consistent on that, are you, JJ? No, you're going to break consistency and have a double standard.
Trumpian world, they could at least be as entertaining as Trump whenever he opens his mouth to say something.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this.
Oh, God. What does Trump have to do with Star Wars anyway?
This guy, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
We get introduced to a guy who looks like discount Tobey Maguire. He looks like he would be Spider-Man in a shitty television movie. This guy's investigating Andor since the 2 guys he killed work for a corporation that specializes in who knows what. Recounting what happens in the show is really hard. Despite him being a secondary protagonist essentially, I don't remember anything about him beyond being dead set on finding Andor. I never caught on to why he dedicates himself so much to finding Andor.
What? You don't know why? Because he cares about the lives of the corporals. That's why. It's the moral greatness. There's people who give a shit in the Empire too. Did you know that? Yes. They care about some of them care about their workers and they want to see them get avenged. They want justice, or what they consider justice, their own sense of justice from the perspective of the Empire. It's the deeper interworkings into the moral ambiguity of situations.
Is it because he was friends with the 2 guys Andor killed, or was it because he wants to get promoted for a job well done?
It's not about being promoted. It's about how much he cares about those workers and how far he's willing to fight just to get them justice. He believes that he doesn't realize that they're corrupt. And they tried to rob an innocent man. He doesn't realize that. He doesn't know the situation. He's only looking at it from the perspective of 2 of those officers got killed by someone. He doesn't know the context. And then, oh, that's not fair. There needs to be justice. That's what he believes. But this is the Empire thinking this. This is what makes it so morally gray.
I don't know. The only other thing of significance in Andor is Bix, this Puerto Rican woman who has a contact.
Why even mention the fact that she's Puerto Rican? Who cares? Why even mention it? This black woman, this Asian woman, this Puerto Rican, like, who cares? Why are you even mentioning that in the first place? Speaking of that, why did you put Trump as a joke when it's not even... What does Star Wars have to do with Trump? Don't you think that if you're going to use humor, the humor should match what you're even talking about? Just an idea. I don't know. Like, I just don't see the correlation.
In the rebellion who intends to buy one of Cassian's stolen thingamajigs. I can't remember what it is. This show is heavily criticized for being so forgettable, and I agree. Also,
no, that's you and your opinion. It got critically acclaimed across the board. What the hell are you talking about? This show has been critically acclaimed.
Like most Star Wars products by Disney, nothing here looks like Star Wars. It looks like some kind of cyberpunk world.
Excuse me. All the artistic direction from the original trilogy, based off of Ralph McQuarrie's original design. Then you have Phil Chiang, who was the new designer who designed the prequels. Movies you love, Phil Chiang designed those. He designed the prequels. You look at the artistic direction. You love that. Isn't that Star Wars? Okay. Guess what? Phil Chiang is the one designing a lot of these. Yes, that's the same guy who designed the prequels. That's right. He's designing The Mandalorian. He designed the sequel trilogy, and he also designed things from Andor and Rogue One. A lot of that was him too. So that means if you're going to get on that design, you might as well get on the prequels design. Come on. Exactly, JJ. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's very inaccurate.
Stuck in the Stone Age or something. It's pretty hard to describe. People say that there's a lot of planets in Star Wars and use that as an excuse for a lot of the places looking like Earth, but that's stupid. Star Wars during the George Lucas era had plenty of locations and managed to make them all different from one another, even if they shared terrains. For example, what's the difference between Camino and Manan? Camino is a rainy planet home to a race.
Okay. I'll admit that when it comes to George Lucas's original creative vision, man, does he make some of the most memorable and unique planets in the Star Wars universe. I mean, and he, of course, he originally created George Lucas, much respect. So I'll give you leeway there. Like, that's something I totally agree with. Yeah, I can understand that. But what about Andor? Staying on topic, we do not see eye to eye on that whatsoever. What is that, dude? What is the deal with that? You playing Tetris while you watching the show and you want me to take what you say seriously?
Of eugenic cloners at its extreme with a cold and sterile environment. Manan is a sunny planet home to a traditional fish-like people who provide a healing substance and has a peaceful nature. What about Coruscant and Taris? Well, the differences also come down to similar factors. Taris is heavily pointed out as an exploitative, capitalist society full of crime and corruption.
What about
almost
Andor?
Like Coruscant in some ways, but it's nowhere near as poor, and the standards of living are very far apart. Taris is Coruscant out of its golden age. I think the thing about planets in Star Wars is that the planets require memorable parts on what's in it. There should be an identifiable gimmick to it and something that makes it stand apart. The characters, aliens, cultures, maybe even super unique terrains make the planet, rather than just the planet itself.
Oh my God.
The reasons why the planets are forgettable, and I don't remember them.
That's just specifics. You see what I mean? This is why they get on people who are original trilogy purists, or here's the thing, like, I get it. You know, when it comes to the EU, I get it. I love the expanded universe so much, but I'm not going to sit there and nitpick the planet terrain of a planet. That's when you know you're going too far. That's when you know you're exaggerating big time, bro. Come on. You got to be real for a second. What in the world?
In Disney Star Wars in general is because there's nothing to them that make them stand apart. Anyways, the Rebel Contact is sort of a central character in the show. I say sort of because I can't remember him for anything except being a rebel. We also see that Bix has a boyfriend named Scottish Slag because I forgot his name. All this guy exists for is to rat Andor out once a wanted poster comes out for him. Later, he's killed off, so this character literally had no point beyond bringing discount Tobey Maguire to Ferrex.
So you missed the point of that scene. He had a relationship with Bix. You realize that, right? Yeah. They actually had something going on, and she used to be with Andor, but she left him because, or they left each other or something like that. I don't know the full specifics. They don't really specify, but they clearly left each other for whatever the reason might have been. So they used to be in a relationship as well. So you missed all of the context of that scene. That's you not paying attention to the show. You're skipping important details already.
Speaking of him, he assembles a team to capture Andor, and once he gets the information he needs, he sends a small task force. We also see Cassian's adopted mother, whose name I can't remember, and who also doesn't do much unless it's in the flashbacks. She was a scavenger during the Clone Wars, and Andor used to be part of a tribe. A separatist ship, or a Republic ship, since the show contradicts what faction the ship belonged to, with separatist symbols, and then referencing it as Republic or something. Great writing, guys. Apparently the guy who wrote this also said they weren't really into Star Wars. It shows too. Kind of explains why the weird writing that isn't Star Warsy.
You know what, Tony Gilroy? You are one of the best writers that has ever come to the Star Wars universe. And that says a lot about just how good of a writer you really are. You're phenomenal. And you did a great thing, and I'd love to see you write more for Star Wars. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's talking about stuff that he barely understands because he was busy playing Tetris while this was going on. And I can tell because you actually skipped specific details about Bix's character throughout the story.
In the slightest, and the terrible non-Star Wars.
And that guy who ratted out Cassian. That guy, you skipped a lot of the context behind his character too, and just said he was only there for one purpose when he had a relationship with Bix, and he had a conversation with Andor, and Andor tried to warn him about Bix, because as a joke though, it was just a subtle humorous joke, with like basically just joking about what it's like to be in a relationship with her and such and stuff like that. You completely missed that. That was in the show too.
Looking sets and whatnot. This is more alienating than Rogue One. If you're looking for something that's good Star Wars, fly past Andor. Do it. Basically, while the show takes its sweet time, Andor meets Bootstrap Bill. I'm calling him that because I can't remember a Star Wars name. This show's pacing is atrocious. They talk for a long while, and meanwhile Tobey Maguire and the rest of the hotel staff, because that's what they dress like.
How is the pacing atrocious? Because it's slow paced? Because it's not rushing every bit of action in your face every 5 seconds? Because it takes the time to let its characters breathe? Are you serious?
Like?
That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?
Do a search and arrest attempt for Andor, and it ends up backfiring. Bootstrap Bill offers Andor a way off-world if he does a job for him or something. To me, it just seems like he's mumbling something about rebellion. Very bland and forgettable. The fat-ass hotel worker also mutters the word shit.
I can only tell you, if I would have used even half of that word, it would have been national scandal. This guy used a filthy, disgusting word on television, and he should be ashamed of himself, and he should apologize, okay?
On top of it being a big no-no word, it's also out of place. Star Wars has always used fictional curse words, such as blast, Sith spit.
You want to talk about out of place? Why are you using Trump in the middle of Star Wars? What does that have to do with anything? I just don't get it. The closest thing to leeway I'll give you on that was the joke about when you curse. Okay, yeah, but okay, fine, I guess, but it's like when you use it over and over and over and over, and that's the main thing, you start wondering, what does that have to do with Star Wars? What? It just, I don't see the correlation, you know. And plus, you could have used that joke with all those kinds of meanings. Why does it have to be Donald Trump? Because you want to use Trump. Because I get that you support him and stuff, but what I'm saying is, if you support a candidate, what does the candidate that you support have to do with Star Wars and Andor and stuff like that? I just don't see the correlation there.
Fairfect, etc. There is no fucking shit unless it's in a parody or non-canon work. Those are very earthly words.
So what? Okay, Star Wars actually cursed for real, okay? Yeah. So what? Who cares? The Republic will live on. Literally. I just don't see how that's a flaw in the story, or how that's gonna topple Star Wars. Oh my god, they had a curse word. It's all over. Oh my god, dude, calm down. Don't be a drama queen about curse words. I've heard expanded universe fans complain about slang in Star Wars, and I was like, dude, there's slang in the expanded universe. It's in Shatterpoint. There's actually slang in there. Yeah, people don't think about that. But yes, it's in there. So if there's slang in the EU, right? And there's even fictional curse words in Star Wars. Then when they use the real ones, who cares? Because in the original trilogy, they said damn. So what? The original trilogy had curse words. What does it matter? See that? That's a contradiction. That's kind of hypocritical to complain about a curse word when the original trilogy is guilty of the same thing.
And should not be used in Star Wars.
Too bad. The original trilogy already did it, so what are you going to do? Get on the original trilogy?
So in something supposed to be canonical is just ridiculous. You should have said poodoo or something.
No. That would have sounded ridiculous, and I'm surprised you actually said that. I wonder if you had a serious face when you said that, too.
Adding shit, along with the other weird ways characters talk, just takes me out of the story.
Okay, well, what's taking me out of your review is the fact that you decided to play Tetris while this show was playing. I'm just saying. Because you actually missed details about the guy who ratted out Andor in the first place.
Can't even recall if they use recurring dialogue from the films. This is the least Star Warsian thing I have ever seen in regards to feeling.
In regards to feeling? Really? Okay. Okay. I guess.
Last Jedi failed because it failed to understand Star Wars properly.
Okay, I can understand. The Last Jedi thought that it had a greater understanding than even its audience, only for it to come across as a little bit pretentious. Okay, so Andor comes in and allows the characters to breathe and live, and I don't want to bring other stuff into it. That's a whole nother topic. If you love The Last Jedi, that's great. There are people who see the deeper elements and the deeper philosophical concepts being tackled, especially between Rey and Kylo. So there's things, if you like The Last Jedi, there's something for you there. However, the thing is, Andor takes the philosophical concepts of the original trilogy and evolves it for a modern audience. All right, we're back. All right, so JJ Plagiarisms, you got a lot to say about Andor. So let's see what you got.
Characters talk just takes me out of the story. I can't even recall if they use recurring dialogue from the films. This is the least Star Warsian thing I have ever seen in regards to feeling.
Oh, please. It's funny how you tripped about them cursing when they cursed in the... They've cursed in Star Wars before. They cursed in the original trilogy. They said damn. So why does it matter if they even decide to say shit? If they cursed in the original trilogy, who cares? Why does that even matter?
The Last Jedi failed because it failed to understand Star Wars properly. Andor is failing because it isn't even being Star Wars. This show literally has nothing to do with Star Wars, aside from taking place in its universe. I'm not saying that because it doesn't have the Force and the Jedi. That's stupid. Republic Commando went without them to great effect. I'm saying that there is nothing recognizable about this Star Wars product. The only reason this show has retained any viewers is because of the name. This feels nothing like Star Wars. Despite that, this show is inoffensive continuity-wise. It just doesn't feel...
No, that's not true. It's not because of the fact that, oh, Well, the reason why people like it is just because it's Star Wars. No, it's because of what it did for its storyline and for its characters. That's the reason why people are all over it. People are all over it for actual legitimate reasons, not necessarily just because of some bullshit of, oh well, people just like it just because of the name property. That's ridiculous, because people have been complaining about Star Wars for years and years despite its name, despite its reputation, so that's not even accurate.
Or look like Star Wars. For once, that's something better than Disney Star Wars, but the problem is that it's fucking empty and boring. Disney Star Wars is almost like a whack-a-mole machine. You hit one and another one pops up in another hole. It's either blunt or offensive or dull and empty. There is no balance to the Force here where they overcome both. Disney, as mentioned before, are literally getting people who understand Star Wars the least. J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, Taika Waititi, etc. People who are so ignorant of Star Wars, yet were tasked with extremely important jobs. It's very tempting to say even Michael Bay could do better, because at least he'd excel at spectacle, a key part of Star Wars.
I don't know about that. In spectacle, there's more important things than spectacle, like storylines, characters, characterization, depth, storytelling. You know, there's more important stuff than even just what you're talking about when it comes to spectacle and stuff like that. You're caring more about spectacle and the boom and the explosions more than the characterization, more than the story, more than character development. Isn't that the whole point of a story? Character development, depth, characterization, so you actually feel like the story is actually immersing you into the story itself.
I hate this about Disney Star Wars. They don't understand Star Wars. People who are either super casual or super ignorant are brought on just because they...
You always do that. Oh, they're just casual fans. And not everybody who likes these shows are just casual fans. There are expanded universe fans who like this. Did you know that? You know, so people shouldn't feel like they have to hide how they feel in the community just because they're worried about what people might think. And you might judge them, but it's foolish to judge those people when they just like what they like. Despite the expanded universe, they still like it anyway. So you can't just bring that into it. Like, people have a right to like what they like.
Maybe accomplished something outside of...
Doesn't make them a filthy casual just because they like something in Disney canon.
Star Wars. I've been told that Looper was the main reason Kathleen Kennedy got Rian Johnson to direct Episode 8, even though regardless of that film, whatever you think about it, is nothing even close to Star Wars. J.J. Abrams was a pretty bad fit too, given he butchered Star Trek before then and doesn't have a single original bone in his body. I'm not even going to repeat what's wrong with Taika Waititi, or what he said that in a just world, he would have been fired immediately in. On top of that, the lead writer for The Acolyte said that she quote-unquote filled the writer's room with know-it-alls and newbies alike, which in Disney speak translates to casuals and ignorance. The know-it-alls, I doubt, would have any idea what a Revan is. I noticed that a lot of this video isn't even about Andor specifically. That's because the other stuff I mentioned is way more interesting to talk about. There's not much to it, and since there's little to talk about that's actually worth a shit, my tangents go off course into more interesting stuff. Anyways, by the end of episode 3, Cassian hasn't even joined the rebellion yet, and in case you're wondering, is nowhere close to doing so. He's put on a job to do a heist to steal something. I don't know, I completely forgot. He's put with a cast of other forgettable...
Hold on a minute, so you don't even know what they're stealing? They're stealing some very expensive things that are worth a lot of credits. Let's put it that way. And what they're stealing are these huge devices that are worth a lot of credits. And the thing about it is they don't know how to fly the machine. Only Andor knows. You see, because they planned this out, but there's things that they weren't even fully prepared for. So it's a good thing Andor was there. You know what I'm saying? And you have to understand that not only was he there and stuff like that, but there's just so much that happened in that scene, such as Andor knowing how every single person shot, and he knew that whether they were right-handed or left-handed. he knew how to fly the machine because he used to work at the shipyards and stuff like that. So he knows how to fly it. And this is important for the story because this is the only way that they can even pull off the heist. And they have to, so they can fund the rebellion instead of just funding just to get some money and then that's it. No, they want to actually put it towards something of purpose and meaning. You see? And that's why.
Well, no-name characters. The names.
So, once again, for the 10th billionth time, JJ, you didn't pay attention to points in the story, literal important story plot points you're not even paying attention to, and you even said yourself, I forgot. Wow. So rewatch the show so you can pay attention, because you can't judge or assess a scene that you barely even remember. You look ridiculous doing that.
Names I have for them are bland, boring, bleh, dull, drowsy, and forgettable. That's my nicknames for them, and I didn't even bother to.
Why? Because you can't take subtlety? You don't understand subtle storytelling? And if you understood the Joker, okay, I'm sure you can understand this. That's crazy how you understand the Joker and you can't understand something like this. It makes no sense to me. What's next? Are you going to say that Better Call Saul's boring because its first episode was almost uneventful, unlike Breaking Bad? Could you even watch Better Call Saul? Could you even watch that show? Given how you're treating Andor, could you even take that show for a second? Now, I've rewatched it multiple times, but can you? Given, the way you're talking about this show already.
Assign them the name specifically. Just use your imagination. That's another thing. This series makes you go crazy with a better imagination of what would have been cooler rather than what was given. This show is as dull as shit. I was hoping that something crazy would happen to take me out of the boredom and emptiness I face while watching.
Yeah, because again, you can't handle subtlety. Yeah, because again, you can't handle subtlety. You don't understand subtle interworkings and symbolism, build up and depth. You have a really bad understanding of these things, and you're thinking about the Joker where it was more overt, but something like Andor that's a lot more subtle behind those kinds of things, you don't understand it. It completely goes over your head. So, of course, yeah, you would say that because it's going completely over your head. Yeah, you would say that.
In the show. Mon Mothma is in this show, and I couldn't tell you what her role is. She doesn't really incite the rebellion much. I think what makes this show so forgettable is that the characters just talk and talk and...
You're a fool. She's funding the entirety of the rebellion. So once again, you missed one of the most important points of the entire show. Don't you realize she's funding the entire rebellion? Don't you understand? So since she's funding it, she's one of the most important characters in the entire series because of what she has to go through just to keep that funding going, just to keep that going, just to make sure that the rebellion is filled so her daughter could live in a better world. And that's why she has her daughter get involved. There's so many things. The bankings are watching her. They're watching her because she took out over $400,000 from her funds, and they're looking into that. They're wondering, where did that $400,000 go? That went to the rebellion, but she can't say that, of course. And then her daughter having an arranged marriage with somebody just so she can get her funds and fuel the rebellion, which makes you start questioning how much are you willing to sacrifice, how much are you willing to give for the cause. That's all the stuff that you missed. You missed that much stuff. And you're like, oh, they're just talking and talking and talking. And yeah, there's a lot of buildup and depth and tension that you're not paying attention to. That's why they're talking in the first place. Hell, there's even a respectful nod to the prequels where they have a political scene that's a lot like the prequels, except it was short. It was more condensed and it got straight to the point, and they just immediately... and it was just really good. It was such an incredible nod. So they also pay respect to both, not just the original trilogy, but they even pay some respects and nods to the prequels too. Something that you didn't even notice, and you call yourself a prequel fan. Really interesting.
And talk, blah, 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 blah. They don't seem to go anywhere with this show. Progressing the plot here is non-existent. They take one step forward each episode.
Yeah, again, because you can't understand pacing and build up, because you want shit immediate. And you even brought up Michael Bay, which is ridiculous because Michael Bay will give you immediate satisfaction with explosions and girls and all these things. And, you know, that's not always bad. Of course not. Oh, no. Yeah, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But what I'm trying to say is the immediate gratification, the immediate satisfaction of something over and over and over and over and over is what you're basically looking for. And that's what you were basically complaining about. Instead of respecting the fact that there's times where there's buildup, there's times where there's tension, and there's times where we don't always get the immediate satisfaction of something, and it's supposed to be that way for a reason.
It's way too slow. J.J. Abrams paced the story like a motherfucker to hide how poorly written it was. But this is just so slow. The pacing is awful, as if I haven't said this a million times over. By episode 6, they're finally doing the heist. And when the heist actually commences, I was actually surprised that it managed to have decent pacing and tension. They take a bunch of hostages and gain access to a vault. And then they take the contents inside. And during all this, I was thinking of how this would make for a much better video game than a series on Disney+. I've said this commonly about a load of Disney Plus shows. They either have a video game vibe to them, but the actual video games being made are still years away. Jedi Survivor comes in early 2023, and that's a major Star Wars title after Fallen Order 4 years ago. It's a slow drog. Aside from this feeling like a video game heist in something like Red Dead Redemption, the shootouts feel exactly like a cover shoot system in a GTA game as well. Would this have made for a better game than a series? Well, anyways, they escape, and then they stop by a medic because one of the thieves was wounded, a character I forgot about immediately. Andor kills one of the other thieves when he turns out to be a bad egg or something. I think another problem is that the show has so many forgettable characters that keeping track of all this is extremely hard. It's around the time you realize that Andor isn't even really a
Yeah, there was a character inside of the show who spent 7 years with the Empire. 7 years until he fell in love with somebody and it changed him on a fundamental level and he stopped. This is why he's turning against the Empire. Then you have another character. She is the cousin of Mon Mothma. She is a very strong character. And she's fierce. This is a fierce character. You understand? And she works with Luthen. And they work very closely together. So there's just a lot going into that. Then you have Luthen. Luthen is one of the best characters. So much characterization. So much depth. And he's willing to go so far just for the cause. And he says that oppression breeds rebellion. So he's willing to take a chance, knowing that this could cause people to be oppressed more, but he thinks that that'll make them more likely to rebel against them, which he's right about that. It did. They're more likely to rebel because they're not, it's not, there's just so much about the themes and the philosophical concepts of what Star Wars is and every essence of what this show presented, especially for characters like Luthen, Daedra Miro, Andor, Cassian, and there's just so many different characters in this show that just had so much substance and depth. And even the characters who died were actually developed and fleshed out prior to their death, so you can feel the emotional weight and depth of their death. Wow. So that's how far this show was willing to go.
Protagonist, despite the show being named after him. He gets like a third of the screen time. He's one of several protagonists. Sometimes it'll just show the perspective of Bootstrap Bill or Mon Mothma or Bix or whatever. I haven't even talked about what kind of character Cassian Andor is, and that's because he has no personality. He's just a dull nobody. Why did they make this a show about Andor? It's easy to get off track because the story being presented is so dull that it's hard to recount recent events. Andor gets a cut of the profits, and then he just goes into civilian life again. He speaks to his adopted mother and Bix briefly, and then he goes on a holiday. I couldn't even tell you what's going on with Mon Mothma. I had to look up other people recounting the story. I said that Shatterpoint was hard for me to keep track of. Andor is even harder to keep track of. Mostly what I was able...
Yeah, because you actually have to pay attention to the subtlety, the nuance in storytelling. You have to actually pay attention to a show like this, something that you don't want to do, so it basically goes right over your head.
To follow was Mon Mothma doing political shit that I couldn't tell you what it was about, and then being at home doing parties with other senators and her husband. Yeah, Mothma has a husband. Generation Tech said that it's implied that she's in an arranged marriage, given the loveless relationship presented, which probably explains why they have no chemistry. But then...
Yes, they're in a loveless marriage. I wouldn't say they don't have chemistry. There's definitely a chemistry in there, but the real issue is the fact that it's not full of love. It was an arranged marriage. This is shown in the show. This is a huge plot point in the series.
Again, none of the characters have chemistry. Andor gets...
That's not even true. There's multiple characters that have chemistry. Castian has chemistry with multiple characters throughout the show. The one guy that he met in the very beginning of the show, and another guy who's at the shop. He has chemistry with those two. He also has chemistry with other characters like Luthen. There is a sort of chemistry there. And a chemistry with Bix. He has chemistry with Bix as well. See that? You know, now I know he hasn't met Daedra yet. That should be interesting to see what goes down in season 2, but when it comes to season 1, yeah, he has a chemistry with Bix as well. And there's a lot of charm and wit between the scenes when they speak and stuff like that. So again, like I said before, when you're not paying attention, these things can fly right over your head.
Gets arrested for something I don't remember and is sentenced to work in a labor camp.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
In case you can't tell, the Trump jokes are...
Yeah, in case you couldn't tell, the Trump jokes barely correlate, and I do mean barely. It is extremely rare. He might have had 2 out of like 10 multiple jokes that may sort of, kind of, you know, but they don't really, overall, they don't even correlate with Star Wars. Of course not. So it's like, what the hell is the purpose of that? I have no idea. I guess it's a sense of humor. I get it, but I just don't see how Trump really matches with Star Wars. I don't get it. I don't see it. It's just like when you made a video on, oh, prequel fans are this, sequel fans are following Obama. What? Are you serious right now? You know, it's funny because I have my own. I thought about Bernie Sanders. You know, I wasn't really thinking about, but you know, I don't really see how. I mean, I just don't even understand. You know, like you try to make politics an integral part of you talking about Star Wars. Like, if you're a prequel fan, you follow Trump. Like, what? You know, so you clearly aren't all there in the head. You know, if you're thinking like that. So it's like, it's kind of hard to take your word for TV shows if you're thinking like that about stuff like that and trying to match it with the TV show.
Keeping me alive during this review. He meets Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis, and this led to numerous fan theories that he would end up becoming Snoke because he was played by the same actor, because we so desperately needed more fan theories on Snoke. Don't people realize that Disney was playing you for a fool? He wasn't Darth Plagueis, or the Inquisitor, or X other character. He was just a shitty mystery box J.J. Abrams made up to invoke theories and get people excited. He was pathetically weak as a villain and a character. Over the course of like 2 episodes after that, Andor just lives in this prison, which is kind of similar to George Lucas's first film, THX 1138, but without the interesting atmosphere.
Wow. So you didn't see the storytelling, the pacing, the tension, the cinematography. You missed all that. That's what made the scene so powerful and brilliant. And it gave a stroke of a level of evil, a subtle evil to the Empire that has never been seen on screen before. Giving a layer, adding new layers of depth to the Empire you never thought you'd ever see.
He then incites the inevitable prison riot that everyone just works there until they die. There's no getting out. At least, not without force on part of the prisoners. I suppose the prison riot was a nice change of pace, but they threw a convenient line where Kino Loy says he can't swim. So he's forced to stay on the prison platform while everyone jumps off and swims away from the prison.
Okay, I'm sorry. I fail to see how is that convenient? A convenient line, oh, he doesn't know how to swim. Yeah, there are people who don't know how to swim. How the fuck is that convenience when there are people who don't know how to swim? Yeah, that's a real thing in real life. In real life, people don't always know how to swim. Okay, so what the hell? What?
Isn't complex. Andor and another guy escape to some nearby land, and with that, they hitch a ride off-world, and Cassian's mother dies. I'm just hamming things in at this point. I was actually playing Tetris on my phone while I was watching this show. It was so dull and forgettable. When the finale finally...
So, you admitted yourself that you were watching Tetris. You were playing Tetris on your phone while the show was going on. So you clearly don't even know what you're talking about. So to listen to you would be inaccurate, because this is coming from the assessment of somebody who was playing Tetris while the show was playing. That's why he barely knows anything about the plot. This is one of the most uninformed reviews I've ever seen. And for the fact that your review is uninformed and you added Trump, it makes you look even more ridiculous. You basically clowned yourself.
Came, I was disappointed that the show was wasted for the climax. A climax that felt like it didn't punch hard enough. After the death of Cassian's mother, Andor during the funeral works to free Bix, who was captured by the Empire, to have information extracted from her concerning Cassian Andor. Basically, after a long while of the show not really going anywhere, Cassian's mother, through a hologram, incites a riot against the Empire, and the entirety of Cassian's hometown attacks the Imperial station there. This all leads to Cassian finally being recruited into the rebellion, I think. Exactly halfway through the show, there's a post-credits scene concerning the construction of the Death Star. So that's Andor. I was not as harsh towards this than other Disney Star Wars shows, and that's because this managed to actually be grounded in the Star Wars universe and not break anything about it to my observations. Granted, the show itself wasn't good, it was dull, it had terrible agonizing pacing, and it doesn't feel like Star Wars. It doesn't look like Star Wars, it doesn't anything like Star Wars. I think the main problem out of all of those was
just, oh, it's dull, it doesn't look like Star Wars or feel like Star Wars. You didn't even break down the fundamentals of the plot, story, or narrative. You barely understood that, and you skipped through multiple elements of the plot and story because you were busy playing Tetris, and you want people to take what you say seriously, and you wonder why I brought up the word clown. The reason why is because clowning yourself is basically you coming over here, speaking with authority on something you barely understand, barely know, didn't even research, didn't even look up the plot to, didn't even pay attention to, and you want people, and then you're bringing up jokes about Trump like that really correlates with Star Wars, and you look even more ridiculous, and you want people to take what you're saying seriously. The dude who was playing Tetris on his phone, the dude who skipped important plot details and storytelling elements, and you want people to take your word for it.
Was the terrible pacing. The show just progressed too slowly. If it had been half the episodes telling the same story, I think it would have massively improved the watchability. I don't even feel the extended runtime really helped the show at all. Cassian was mostly just a main character instead of the main character. Following Andor, I think, was a mistake. He had no character in Rogue One, and they failed to give him one in the series. His search for his sister went nowhere, as it was just the catalyst for the entire plot. But it itself was a tease, I suppose.
No, that's the point. Him trying to search for his sister is going to lead him into the rebellion, making him realize his sister died on Kenari. That's something he doesn't realize because he's still looking for it, because he still remembers her. You understand?
Maybe it'll just go somewhere in season 2, but I doubt it, given she's not really shown or mentioned anywhere after the flashbacks are over. Speaking of, the flashbacks didn't really serve a purpose in the larger story, like the heist, the rebellion rising, etc. I don't recall anything the Empire did bad, in fact. And this show doesn't break canon from my observations, but it doesn't enhance it either. As I said, the series doesn't look or feel like Star Wars. It doesn't even really feel like Rogue One. It has a...
Exactly, I was about to say, it's different from Rogue One. That's the point. That's what makes Andor so good. It's not going to be the same as Rogue One, but For you to say it doesn't look or feel like Star Wars, it has the original artistic design and direction from the original trilogy. What are you talking about? How does that not look like Star Wars? Are you saying that remember those clone troopers? Death troopers? Yeah. Are you trying to say that that doesn't look like Star Wars? Are you fucking kidding me right now? Really?
A lot of the same problems as Rogue One, but the tone is completely different. Andor's bad pacing really hindered the gripping of the story. This feels like a novel that's exactly adapted from book to show without proper translation. Obviously, when you're making an adaptation of a book, you need to make sure that the movie can stand on its own. But
you can't make that comparison because this is an original project that had nothing to do with any novel, so that's irrelevant.
when a character is thinking something, you need to change the presentation, and that's why there's going to be changes. Obviously, Andor isn't based on a book, but it feels like it is. But it's like they adapted every part of the non-existent book and didn't translate it to work as a series. Andor would have been better delegated to a book, because from a logistical standpoint, this isn't going to increase Disney Plus subscriptions, and it didn't. The lack of interest in the premise alone forced...
Yeah, but it got critically acclaimed, and it did.
Disney to put this on cable television. While Star Wars Explained is defending the show, ignorant as always, I'm just sitting there saying, I told you so. This show completely wasted the larger premise of the Rebellion Rising. They tease Yeah,
it's funny because you underestimate just how much critical acclaim that this show actually garnered. And it garnered a hell of a lot more critical acclaim than you're giving it credit for.
More, for example, but didn't deliver on the cameo. Believe.
And you were like, oh, I said I told you so. Actually, it's really the other way around. I told you so, because guess what? It got critically acclaimed. Let's see. Let's see Andor's critical acclaimness. Let's see. That's pretty good. 89% and 79% for audiences. Not bad. But anyway.
Me, I'm indulging myself on Star Wars, and let me tell you that this is one of the least Star Warsian feeling things I've ever seen. The Last Jedi was terrible for completely different reasons, but it was trying to be Star Wars kind of. It just had no idea what Star Wars was. As I pointed out, Rian Johnson had no clue how balance in the Force worked because he tried changing it. Andor is the first in the Disney Plus nightmares in terms of shows that avoided offending fans. Most of the criticisms come down to its dull and boring nature, and I suppose I'd rather the franchise dry out than it being ruined by a bad story that destroys what came before. There is a line I need to draw between whether something actually ruins Star Wars or it's just a bad story that doesn't affect the good stuff, or something else entirely, like Dark Empire, which is actually a good story but hated by those who never actually bothered to read it, especially after The Rise of Skywalker came out and plagiarized Dark Empire. Coming soon. The sequels irrefutably butchered the source material. Rogue One adhered to it, but was dull, and The Mandalorian is a little bit of both, with Dave Filoni pulling Star Wars towards how he sees fit and retconning pre-established Disney canon. Even the stuff based on his own outlines, like the Ahsoka novel. I'm fine with stories experimenting, but you still gotta feel like Star Wars. Perhaps something like Star Wars is not easy to replicate, but the expanded...
It does feel like Star Wars. Again, it has the artistic direction of Ralph McQuarrie, the original artistic direction. Now, this is technically Phil Chiang, but what I'm saying is, you know, it's got the original artistic direction for the original trilogy, okay? It has a lot of the philosophical concepts and motifs from the original trilogy, and it's being executed in a new way, evolving it for the modern era. So what are you talking about?
Universe authors for the longest time managed to do it. I don't know why Disney can't. Well, actually, I do know. Dave Filoni doesn't truly understand Star Wars, and he's convinced people that he's an everyman on Star Wars, and everyone...
Dave Filoni had nothing to do with Andor, so why are you bringing that up?
Everyone looks to him for advice instead of George. Dave Filoni had little to do with the series in particular, but the point is, his influence is everlasting. Andor feels too...
Actually, that's wrong. He has no influence on Andor, so I don't know why you're bringing that up once again.
detached from the films. There's no clever callbacks that I noticed, and that line where that character says shit was so out of place, and the way the characters talk feels generic. The only references I noticed was the prison, which people found similarities to THX 1138, but aside from that, nothing. I wasn't going in expecting a masterpiece or a disaster, but rather a bland, forgettable show, and I was right. Just like Star Wars, Andor is not some of the best Star Wars content ever. It's just that a severely limited Disney Star Wars only experience would give you that impression. An easy trap to fall into, but you...
No, even if you've seen other Star Wars projects, you can see what makes Andor different from those projects. Because I've read into the expanded universe and I've seen other Star Wars projects and they're great. Like Star Wars Republic is fucking badass. Hell yeah. And I really wish that I could have seen it on screen. However, despite this, Andor is fucking excellent. So that is untrue. You don't need to see... you don't need to focus and hyper focus on just the EU. Like that's the only way to be Star Wars. That's bullshit. If you really think that that's the only way to be Star Wars, that is bullshit. I'm an EU fan telling you that. Don't let that limit you. Don't set limits for yourself. Don't let that stop you.
You guys have to realize at some point when something isn't good. So my conclusion on Andor is dull, uninteresting, but not a franchise ruiner. Just something that dragged on for way too long.
Yeah, just something that, you know, subtlety, depth, nuance, something that you're not really a fan of. You'd rather the spectacle, and you'd rather the expanded universe only. The way that specifically the expanded universe did it. I understand, you know, yeah.
And wasted a story opportunity, but on its own merit, not on that of the OG 6 movies by George Lucas. I wanted this review to be longer, but after watching it, it just ain't worth it. I give Andor Season 1 a 5 out of 10. If it violated rules, it would have been lower.
Wow, a 5 out of 10. And you're talking about being reasonable with your reviews?
I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what?
Well, it's a wrap. This is one of the most poorly informed reviews I've ever seen for any show that I've ever watched. Very poorly informed, didn't do a good job assessing the show, skipped through important plot elements, skipped through character development, skipped through characterization, skipped through the depth, skipped through the subtlety, skipped through the nuance, and skip through important scenes that add a lot of special and interesting and important context to the characters that you claimed, oh, weren't even all that flesh, like there's not much behind these characters, what's behind this show? Yeah, and they gave you a bunch of story and depth behind these characters that you didn't even pay attention to. You ended up skipping it in your review because you were busy playing Tetris. So yeah, with that, I'm ending this poorly informed review. This was Tarragon. Thank you for watching.